Welcome back, Generals and Admirals. This is General Johnny, and today we're going over the U.S. air power. We're going to go over the different aircrafts and the different loadouts, what the best uses are, and how you can get the most out of the air superiority that the U.S. nation brings into Broken Arrow. So, if you're wondering, hey, is there anything I can do better to maximize my airplay? Do you think you're doing the right loadouts? Do you have any questions about what the right loadouts would be? And just some basic information about using air in the game in general. I think it will be useful to you guys. So without further ado, this is General Johnny Strategy. Please like, subscribe for future content, and we'll go ahead and get this one kicked off. So some basic terms that you're going to want to know out front is, for instance, ASF, so Air Superiority Fighter. So those are going to be your main fighters. Now, I would pick out, depending on your specializations, at least bring one or two of these. When I play air, the thing is, you're going to have to decide what categories you want to maximize on. If you bring one of every category, that is fine, but understand that sometimes it is better to have a specialization rather than a variety. But if you like the variety, you definitely can do that. Just understand what loadouts you're going to have to do to fill those certain roles. So again, you have ASF, you have seed planes, that's going to mainly counter enemy radar with their anti-radiation missiles. You have air-to-ground fighters, so something with Mavericks that is, specifically designed to take out ground vehicles. You have bombers, and there's all sorts of different bombers that we're going to go through, and we'll talk about all the classes of bombs. So going into the different types of armaments, you have rockets, you have cruise missiles, you have bombs, and you have missiles. Okay, so when we talk about missiles, you have long, medium, and short range missiles, and that's going to be primarily what you're going to use for armaments when you're looking at an ASF fighter. So you're going to want to decide what kind of missiles fill your role, and yeah, they have different terminal guidance. Some of them are semi-active, some are infrared. We'll go over a little bit of what that means later as well. And then also looking at the bombs. So the different types of bombs, you're going to have the high drag bombs, you're going to have the free fall bombs, you're going to have the precision bombs. Okay, those are the main types of bombs, and really what gives the advantage for the U.S. are going to be the precision bombs. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So going into each of these tabs, I'm going to talk about each of the aircraft briefly, give some in-game kind of descriptions of what those bombs looks like, and kind of give you a visual of how to use them. And then at the very end, we'll talk about the main advantages that the U.S. has over the Russians, and the main thing is going to be the stealth. Okay, and why that is so important in fighters and bombers. So without further ado, let's get on into these tabs and into these airframes. So the first one we have is the Harriers. So I don't really use Harriers a whole lot. I've seen this used before as an anti-helicopter with the sidewinders. 4 AIM-9 sidewinders onto this with the GAU-12, and that's able to take out helicopters in a pinch. Okay, I also use the night attack sometimes. I think the best use for this, and you have a bunch of armaments, but either add the fire bombs onto this or just make it a Mark 82 bomber or what have you. But I think you can get these pretty cheap, about 180, if you really need to clear out a building or make a bombing run. This is probably going to be a sacrificial plane, but it's very slow with 540 speed, so be careful using these. Okay, then you have the Prowler, which is mainly a seed plane. So seed stands for suppression of enemy air defense, and actually seed can be accomplished through multiple different ways. A lot of people, when they call for seed in this game, they mean to say that a plane with anti-radiation missiles. So this is a harms missile. Okay, it locks onto radar when it's on. So that's really what they mean here. I usually outfit this with 4 harm missiles. That's just to overload the enemy AA. However, you know, if you want to run it with 2, or even you can run 3, I think this actual system comes with yeah, so you can do 1 or 3 or 2 or whatever you want to do, but I suggest going 4 just for the quantity. Okay, now we have the FA-18 Charlie Hornet. Okay, so you can equip this a few different ways. It does have the ability to bring the gunslinger, which is pretty nice. It's 9,000 millimeter range, so it's pretty far. This the furthest that missiles go out in a fighter, but keep in mind that it is on the Hornet, so you're paying a little extra for something that's not really built to be that long range of a fighter. So it really depends. You can make this a cheaper fighter to bring out, you know, at the beginning of the game for air attacks or what have you, but it just all depends on kind of what you want to do. Okay, the way I use the Hornet is actually with Mavericks. So this is a cheap you know, air-to-ground fighter that you can send in with 4 Mavericks, and you know, you can splash the enemy like that. And because it's a little bit quicker, it can get in and out with decent survivability. The F-35 Bravo is actually probably the best airframe, in my opinion, in this game for hitting the back line. In general, I think it has so many different roles, and this is really key to why the U.S. has better air superiority and just better air in general than the Russians in this game, at least. So it's because of their stealth rating. So there's 1.75. Just to give you a perspective, most of these planes are going to be at a 12,000 meter spotting range. So with 1.75, you bring your spotting, so the enemy is only able to spot you out to 6,857 meters, while likewise the heaviest stealth plane that Russia has only has a 1.25 stealth rating. Okay, that means you can see out to 9,600 meters. So that's a difference of almost 3,000 meters in the spotting range, which is pretty huge when you're talking about aircraft. So again, and this is going to allow your aircraft to get much closer, especially when you talk about fighting you know, surface-to-air missile sites, the SAM sites, the S-300s, okay? These are going to allow the F-35s to get right up on top of them, at least drop their bombs before getting out of there. Now, whether those bombs are accurate is on you, but the fact is that the ability to get that close without the enemy really being able to do anything is why the stealth is so important. Okay, and then the precision bomb loadout that you can have in this game, and especially in the US faction, is really good. And I am a huge believer in these Stormbreakers, and I'll show you an example why. But you can really hit multiple targets in the back line, and these Stormbreakers can destroy you know, S-300s, really a lot of things with just one Stormbreaker, depending on how direct the hit is. But if you are pretty sure of the area in which the enemy is, you can drop 6 of these, cover that area, and you'll get at least a kill, if not more. And then it can have obviously the ability to hit 6 targets. Really, I like to use at least 2 per target, so on average you're going to be able to hit, you know, 3 targets with certainty of destroying them. So that is why the stealth bombers, and it considers a stealth bomber, even though it can also be a fighter, and it actually can fill a lot of different roles. But stealth bomber like the F-35B is pretty dang good. Okay, and then I'm not really going to mention in this video all the cargo helicopters and the AC-130 because it's pretty self-explanatory. Something I need to use a little bit more. There are ways to do this with the airborne ability to drop units to the front very fast. And the thing to know about this is a lot of these airdrops are pretty cheap relative, right? You can easily spend 150 on a transport. And if you think about it, some of these, this one's only a 185, all right, for getting your guys out there super fast, airdropping them. So it's a really awesome ability, but we won't talk much about it today. All right, the Thunderbolt, the A10 Thunderbolt is actually great. I love it as a airframe for the Mavericks. I love it with the ability to destroy tanks and armored vehicles, the air-to-ground missiles, okay? However, the only thing is it is very slow, 450 speed here. However, that's kind of a double-edged arrow because, or sword, is because when you bring this into a strike, it is going to be able to target a lot more vehicles because of that speed. However, its survivability is not going to be too great. So while I do like the A10, it only is used in certain situations, and if the enemy does not smoke or they have expended their smoke, then it has pretty good effectiveness. The B1 Bravo Lancer is pretty good. You have plenty of options here. I've seen best way to use this is with the JASMs or with the nuke. Obviously, if you have the special force specialization, you're going to want to use that as a nuke because it has the stealth ability, a lot more survivable. But the B1 does have the ability to afterburn, and obviously if you're running airborne and some other specialization, this may be your only option. You got the C-130J Hercules and the C-17 Globemaster. Again, some cargo planes for you there for airdrops. The F-15 Charlie Eagle is pretty good as just a base fighter. Okay, so you can equip this mostly with AIM 120s, AIM 9. So you can also equip it with the Sparrow. So the Sparrow is interesting in the fact that it's semi-active, which means you need to hold a lock with your plane, and it's also a weird distance. So it's 5,000 meters, so it's a medium ranged, I say almost short ranged missile, air-to-air missile. But you can see here with the AMRAAM 7,000 meters, so you're playing with a little bit of 2,000 meters and then also the targeting on it. So I would say it's always good to have, and it is pretty decent at medium range. So if you're going to fly this into the enemy air, okay, then it is nice to have kind of a mixture of these missiles. If you have 8 AMRAAMs, it's one thing, so you could set it up like that. However, if you have less, sometimes it'll shoot much slower. We'll talk about it in a second, but the more missiles of a certain type that you have, the faster they're going to ripple fire off of each other. If you have 2 AMRAAMs, it's going to fire very, very slow compared to if you have 8 AMRAAMs, or if you have 20 AMRAAMs, like we'll show you in a second, that fires very, very fast. You can rip off something like 6 missiles in the span of 3 or 4 seconds. So that's how big the difference is there. But again, F-15 Charlie Eagle is a decent all-around fighter if you don't want to pay anything too expensive. The F-15 Echo Strike Eagle, I usually bring them with the CBU clusters, 1,000 pound, so we have 12 of those, and this is going to be able to blanket an area, and even if it doesn't destroy enemy tanks, you use this usually against armor formations or groupings. Don't use it against infantry, it's not worth it. It is a decent survivability because of the speed. However, if they do have decent AA, this is going to get shot down. But if you're trading it for an armada or a group of tanks, maybe an armada plus something else, this is pretty good. And even if it doesn't destroy it, it will immobilize it with the 12 CBU 87 clusters, which is going to be a low altitude high drag bomb. You're not going to have the issue as much with their survivability. It's after they drop that usually you lose your plane in those kind of situations. So next we have the F-15EX Eagle 2. Now this plane is a beast. It has so many different options. You can do a lot with it. There is a JASSM / harm missile loadout that you can have on this that works out really well. You can equip it with a bunch of JDAMs and make this a bomber. The end point of this, though, is it is really expensive, okay? Especially if you start stacking on these pylons, it can get very expensive. I think it can get up to like 600 points or something like that, or 550 for one of the builds. But I kind of like it with this build. So 16 AMRAMs, and we'll show you kind of in a second what that looks like and how fast those ripple fire. And then you also have these sidewinders. That's just to after, and the point of this would be to bring it out at the beginning of the game. Okay, let it fire all of its missiles at the enemies. Let the enemy planes lose all of its flares, and then obviously just overload them and destroy as many planes as you can at the beginning. That is the main point of having this build out. But again, if you want the different build outs, you really can't go wrong. Just beware of when you call these out of what they're supposed to do, because they are super expensive, and if you lose it, you don't want to lose it for no reason. The Stratofortress, I actually like using it with the the free fall bomb. So the 18 Mark 84 2,000 pounds. Okay, this thing can absolutely level forest, buildings, what have you. For 400 points isn't really all that bad. It will get shot down if they have any sort of anti-air or whatever, but it is a nice option to have. I usually don't use it, but if I was going to use it, I would do that. You can also use it with these cruise missiles, and that is definitely an option. I'm just not a huge fan of it because it takes too much micro, in my opinion. So those are kind of your options there. The F-16 Charlie Fighting Falcon, again, a lot of different ways to use this one. I actually really like it with the 6 Mavericks because it is a lot faster than your Thunderbolt. So this one is a lot more survivable because it's fast. You can afterburn in and out, hit your targets. I would suggest to stop the afterburn as they're hitting targets with the Mavericks, because you want them to maximize that amount of time that's going to be a lock onto the enemy and fire those at those targets. Also, you'll notice a lot of my planes will have the sidewinders on, and especially the air-to-ground fighters, because I like the fact that when they fire at the ground targets, they can also fire a sidewinder if there's helicopters, which more than likely there will be helicopters on the approach route, and they can fire off and hit those helicopters with their sidewinders without really taking away from the rest of their gun run. So that's how I use the Fighting Falcon, but there are a lot of different options, a lot of different bombs that you can use here, obviously, as well. You have the F-16 CJ. Okay, I think this is probably the best harm or seed plane just because of its speed and survivability. Again, you can afterburn this. 2 of these would be absolutely deadly to go in and out and kill the enemy AA, so super survivable. I usually equip it with, really, I have ran it both ways. You can do 4 harms. The 2 harms does the trick as well. If you want to do the extra ECM, I really like to run my planes with the ECM, so it just makes it a lot more survivable if you do run it with the ECM, but that's kind of a personal preference. You can go super cheap with this with the fuel tanks, but just know that it probably will get shot down. It is fast, it is maneuverable. However, with 2 harms, you're taking a little bit more risk without using the ECM or 4 harms. It depends how you want to mitigate that there. Okay, the Viper, the F-16 Viper is probably my favorite bomber. This is the way I run it. There's a lot of different ways you can run this. You can run quantity of JDAM 500 pounds. I usually use the 2,000 pound, so I get 2 of those. I get 4 of the 500 pounds. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to hit 6 targets, or it allows you to blanket one area. So one forest, one building, maybe 2 buildings that are close by. I do get the designation pod. So the reason I do that is if I want to come in with a strike, I want to drop, let's say, a 2,000 pound JDAM and a 500 pound JDAM will absolutely kill a laser designated armada or any sort of Russian tank that you find. It'll be able to penetrate and kill that from the top attack with those laser designated rounds. But it will also allow you 4 more targets if you want to with the 500 pounds. This is also really good to hitting backlines too, because this is super fast. It is relatively survivable. Okay. You know, if you're going to hit the background lines and they still have some established backlines, it will be able to trade well. Okay, you'll be able to hit 4 or 5 targets at max, usually around 2 or 3 at the very least. And you'll be able to trade and destroy, you know, their AA or their artillery if that's being annoying with these kind of bombs, just because they're a larger explosion and they give a lot more leeway, but it probably will get shot down if you're going for an established backline. Next we have the Spooky. Obviously this is a very niche kind of plane. Won't go too much into it. If the enemy has any sort of AA or ASF up, you're probably going to lose that battle. The B-2 bomber, now this is the best, nuke bomber in the game because of their survivability. A lot of people, I think they understand this, but you know, you are essentially trading points the entire game. So the air tab is really important to understand that how many points you're putting out and fielding on these planes, because it's really easy to shoot out these planes that get shot down and you're not thinking about the amount of points that you're losing. Obviously with something like the nuke, you're going to lose 1,000 points if this gets shot down. So obviously prep for the nuke, let your teammates know, send out seed prior to the nuke, saturate the air environment so that when your nuke comes out, it has a chance to get out, so that you are at the start at least not 1,000 points down. You want to have, some ability to gain points rather than give them the points. Okay. So the nuke is pretty good. You really won't have a problem unless they have some serious ASF up and you really don't have any. So this will be able to drop the bomb. It's just about the survivability of turning it around. It is slower. It does have pretty awful turn radius, but if you're covered, it does have enough of its flares, of its ECM, and obviously its stealth to get in and get out if you cover it correctly. The F-17 Nighthawk, the only way I've ever really ran this is with the JASMs. So you can get 2 JASMs, and what this allows you to do is real quick pop out some fire support and get some precision strikes. I would suggest lasing these if possible. You can also bring these out to help with your seed and saturate the air environment, again with missiles, but really this is for precision strikes and providing some fire support to the front. Okay, I don't think this is going to be good enough. It does have a 1.75 stealth rating, but it's pretty slow, and I don't think the turn radius is that great either. So it's kind of tough to use in a bombing situation. Not to say it's bad, I just honestly haven't used it that much. The F-22 Raptor is probably the best plane for the US, depending on the role. Now, if you're going to use, and there's several different ways to use it, you need to decide if this is going to be a long-range fighter, which I think you should consider it. I think that's the best way to use this because it has the 1.75. Again, we talked about the 3,000 meter spotting range advantage that it has compared to the Russians, as far as it getting spotted 3,000 meters further because of its stealth rating. So I usually like to add the JATMs. again, this is a 9,000 meter missile, so I usually get 4 of those, and the best way to use this is loiter it in the back, even at the beginning of the game. Let it fire off the 4 missiles, so it's eating up enemy ECMs. It's potentially hitting enemies from 9,000 meters away without putting itself at risk. Once it's fired its missiles, you can go ahead and get that out of there. It also comes with 2 AMRAAMs and 2 Sidewinders just as part of the plane, so keep that in mind. All for 440 points. That's pretty decent. Yeah, it's an expensive plane, but in theory it should be relatively safe if played correctly. So it's 440 points. That's pretty secure. Okay, next we have the F-35 Alpha, and we already talked about the F-35 Bravo. The armaments are a little bit different. You can add in the HARMS missile. I don't think is an option on the 35 Bravo. Yeah, it's not. So this is more of a multi-role. They have the cruise missiles, so you can run this a few different ways. You can run with the cruise missile. You can run with the HARMS missile if you want it to be more of a seed plane. But like I said earlier, there's more than one way to seed. You can actually use these Stormbreakers to attack backline. This is obviously one of my preferred methods. You get 8 Stormbreakers as opposed to 6, so again, even more precision bombing power. You still get the same, stealth rating, so these bombs are more than likely going to hit the background or backline. You can also use, I really like the 2,000 pound option here. It makes it a little bit expensive. You can use the JSOW, kind of show you what that looks like for precision bombing. So this is taking out, tank problems with high survivability is the main purpose here. So the F-35 Alpha just has more options, has more mass, but is a little bit more expensive as well than the USMC variants. Okay, next we have the MC-130H. Again, really not talking about that. So that really closes out with the planes. So yeah, in general, like I said, the US just has a lot of different options. I think they have, like I said, the EX Eagle has a lot of options that make it superior to fighting, bombing, or what have you. I think that the stealth rating is a huge part in the US being dominant in the Air Force, at least in this game. But there's plenty of options, so hopefully this helped you with your loadouts, kind of gave you some examples of what these look like in the game. But if you have any questions or concerns on how to best use this, please follow me on General Johnny Strategy, and I will see you next time.